And then Gig said hello from the chat, but her mic is not connected. And so, Anne, if you want to take it away and let me know when to move the slides through. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'm going to start us off. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking some time out of this morning to talk about business outreach. So what is business outreach? Really, our goals are to provide information, assistance when needed, and then our ultimate goal is compliance. And I put these photos in there just to show the one on the bottom left is, yeah, Pam said when I was down in Rutland. Um, and, the goal is to enter the business and have an informal conversation with, here it was the man this was at a hotel at the desk. And then what you really want, though, is the photo on the right is when they, I think this was maybe at Walmart, when they took us behind the scenes and you get to really see how they're managing their waste. So that's kind of the ultimate goal. And we're going to talk a little bit about tone and how you can approach a business to have them welcome you into the back of their store. So you can move it on, Shannon. So our goals for today are to share information and resources and to encourage a conversation among all of you. To share or talk a little bit about our outreach script, which is really the goal there is to help folks who are new to business outreach before you kind of develop your own way of approaching businesses. This gives you a really nice outline of things you can say. And then we're going to get into breakout rooms just really briefly because we are a bigger group to have a conversation about business outreach. And then we're going to get tips and inspiration from Alex and Emily so that you learn more from other swimmies. And then we'll have hopefully time for Q&A at the end. And we asked Alex and Emily to share kind of one experience that went well and one that didn't go so well. So you have an idea of what that might, or how things might go when you're out in your communities. So A&R business outreach. So what's kind of our method? We'll usually start off with, a goal of an area that we want to reach, and we'll contact you. We'll contact the swimmies and see where you've been or what's on your list. We will also reach out, although we haven't done this so much since COVID, but we used to reach out to the health inspectors, and hopefully we'll start doing that again just to see what they can share, mostly about restaurants and learning about the size of a restaurant and whether they are separating food scraps or not. And then we will develop our list of businesses. We like to prioritize kind of the larger generators of food scraps, but we like to go, to all different types of businesses, and we'll work with the SWIMI to develop that list. And then this got changed a little bit. Basically, our goal is informal conversation. So, or walk and talk with the business and just see how they're managing waste, what their questions are, because most likely nobody's ever really probably come to them to talk about waste before. And then if changes are needed, we'll tell them what they need to do. We like to be pretty direct and clear, and with a timeline. And usually we're giving 60 days. We'll send a letter following up with the outline of what they need to do. And then we have our own spreadsheet where we're tracking and documenting compliance. And sorry, so this slide got changed a little bit, but
sorry about that.
Yeah,
I realized I didn't close it out and reopen it.
It's a different one, so I'm like,
doing this. So
that's okay. I mean, I think what we were talking about before, finding the right person to talk to, is when you call a business, usually I will ask for a manager if possible. But if you can't get a manager, talk to whoever answers the phone or an assistant manager. But ideally, you want to get to a decision maker. So you can go to the next slide. So how do we work together? So in those photos in the beginning, that was me going out with SWAC, with Pam's group. And actually Rutland County was there too. I think they had a Eco AmeriCorps that was going around with us. Um, so we like to schedule specific days. If you want us to come with you, we don't have to, but we like all of you. So and then um we can decide, you know, develop from a list of where we want to visit and then where the swimmy wants to visit. We can decide who's going to visit which business. If there are some that you'd rather we do on our own, that's fine too. Um, and again, our goal is compliance. And so we can go and do trainings if that is requested. And, when we used to go out, we would have this thick packet of all these different um, handouts. And that was mostly because the universal recycling law was still being rolled out. And we just felt like there was so much information that businesses needed. And luckily now the businesses do have a better idea of what's going on. And so I think we've pared down what we hand out, and then we just will refer them to our website, to VT Recycles. And we always give our business cards too. So again, to encourage a conversation. And then you can go to the next slide, Shannon.
Great. So we just wanted to take a moment just to highlight really what all of your individual swimmies, as you may be aware, may not, because I recognize like some of you are newer in your position than others, but each swimmy has this SWIP, their solid waste implementation plan, that highlights the responsibilities for your specific entity when it comes to business outreach. And so if you ever have questions about what conversations you should be having, what types of information you should be sharing, like aside from us taking this moment to have this conversation, you can always refer to your SWIP, just for a reminder of all the topics that need to be covered. As you can see, covered either in person or by phone. At a minimum, disposal ban information, how to recycle. I mean, all of these conversations happen rather organically when you're doing business outreach. And then maybe making sure to talk about, how to reduce wasted food, manage the hazardous waste. Again, just to try to make sure that your conversation, even if it is just sort of a quick one-off, in informal conversation, that you're touching upon all these topics and providing resources for them if you feel that's necessary. And then here in the documentation portion, again, if you ever need a reminder of what information you should be keeping track of that will be reported for your SWIP. That would be the list of businesses, institutions contacted, the date you contacted them, if you provided any outreach materials, and the status of recycling and food scrap diversion, and whether follow-up is needed. And so, we recognize that in some conversations, it can be difficult to sort of get all that information out of the business, but the ultimate goal is to get at least that basis of information, whether or not they're recycling and composting, so that you know whether or not some follow-up is needed. And to help swimmies with this, you may have seen these resources before. We have both the business outreach checklist, which outlines all the different types of materials, the organics, the recycling, the hazardous waste. So you can take all the appropriate notes. I also, when I was with the district, I found just bringing out a notebook helped. Now I do use these a little bit more. I'm getting used to the organization of it, but um, that certainly depends on your preference. But this checklist and this spreadsheet are both available on our planning page, and we do have a link at the end of this presentation to that. And so again, we have this checklist for the in the moment outreach, so you can take notes, keep them a little bit organized. Thank you, Emma, for putting in that planning web page into the chat. And then for afterwards, for the record keeping and reporting, we offer this Excel spreadsheet, which, I mean, it's a very small portion. It's hard to see, but it does outline the name of the institution, the date you contacted them, if they are separating recycling, organic material, the special recyclables such as fluorescent bulbs, paint, batteries, and then any notes that you would want to take as well. And so what is expected for businesses, right? When you walk into a business and you have these conversations, as we've discussed, the ultimate goal is compliance. And, if you ever feel like you're at a point with a business that, um, compliance is difficult to get to, that's certainly where we can assist in the process as well. Because again, that is the ultimate goal, that generators and businesses have a system to separate out their food waste and recycling from the trash. And that includes the staff being trained. And so, like we saw in one instance recently, that food scrap separation was at the business, but that the employees weren't fully trained all throughout the different parts of the grocery store. So, that was a great opportunity to ensure compliance and food scrap separation was happening at all locations. And we do want to emphasize prioritizing the food recovery hierarchy, make sure that businesses understand opportunities for donating quality food after they've considered ways to reduce food waste. And again, the emphasis on feeding animals and the opportunities for that, which we understand can be a little bit difficult when it comes to businesses choosing to feed swine, and how they cannot eat meat and fish items or anything that's come in contact with that. And so that might be a topic of conversation to have with a business. Um, but, and we also recognize that businesses may be able to dispose of de minimis amounts of food waste. And so having conversations that help them maybe determine that or think about the waste streams that they have, if they're truly de minimis or not. And if you ever have questions about that, you can certainly reach out to us at the DEC, because that is, I think, a case by case situation. Oh, yeah. And so these are all of the resources that we have available for you to take out into the field with you, or follow up electronically with a business if you do make contact by phone. Because again, we recognize business outreach does not need to be in person. I know for me personally, when I was at the district, I always found that to be useful, but it does not need to be that way. And so I'm going to go through these quickly. You may have probably seen them before. Our Waste Not Guide, highlighting things that are banned from landfill disposal. Vermonter's Guide to Recycling, also available in a variety of languages. We offer signage for businesses to use at their waste station or disposal stations. Um, we offer a variety of FAQ guides, from managing food scraps in bear country, business and school requirements, our single-use product law, sustainability tips. Again, these can all be found on our website, and we have a link in the end. Again, information about paint care. We offer the brochure, which many of you have probably seen. This is the beginning portion of it. And online, we have a variety of resources in different languages as well. And we do have our source separation policy coming out soon that will help businesses determine to what extent using a depackager is appropriate. I don't know much about that yet, but that guidance will be out soon, in addition to a food recovery guidance. And if you have some questions about that, we can answer in the end, because I'm not, they're coming up on the horizon, so I'm not fully certain of what they're going to say. And this is where we're going to lead into quick breakout rooms. I did send a link to this script, and I believe, and we put the planning page link in the chat as well, and the script is found on that. But Emma recently created this script, and we just want to take a moment to go into breakout rooms, talk about not necessarily the use of this script in particular, but just using something like this as a tool, and recognizing, how can we build positive relationships? Oh, it's revised. I guess it's not new. Thank you, Emma. How is tone important? And so we just wanted to go into some breakout rooms to have a little bit more candid of a conversation about, again, the importance of building positive relationships with businesses, how tone can lead into that, and how that can help us reach our ultimate goals. DEC folk, I'm hoping that, depending on how rooms break out, we may have, visible leaders to help facilitate in some of the rooms. Um, like Emma and Alyssa and Emily and myself and Alex. But if one of us are not in the room, if you can just again have a conversation and, be candid about it.
And we're just
And
going to be in the rooms for about 5 minutes. It'll be
okay.
short. Um, and this is new for me. So hopefully, magically, you're going to be assigned to 4 different rooms, and then we'll bring you back in 5 minutes. So let's see what happens.
Yes, this is a test. Let's see if we pass or fail trying to do breakout rooms.
Okay. They're opening now.
Join room. Assign room in 10 seconds. Okay.
Okay, you're slowly leaving my screen. Hi, everyone. I don't know if you can hear you, but I'm going to close the rooms in about 30 seconds.
cycle and all that. So, oh well, we're done.
That's a great point. Well, great, everyone. I can imagine some people's sentences got cut off like mine did. And I was like, oops, even though it said the 10-second thing up there.
Yeah, sorry, everyone. I definitely didn't like doing that to people, but
Yeah, it is a little interesting. So now we're going to move into the challenges and successes with Alex and Emily. And so we actually didn't figure out who would go first. And so, Emily, if you're prepared to go first, where is your face on my screen? I don't even see it.
Can you see me now?
Oh, you're right there. No, yeah, you were
Okay.
behind the transcription thing. Sorry. So great. If you want to go ahead and share your successes and challenges, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah. So I have two situations to talk about, both with kind of the same core challenge of a off with the positive resolve situation because I like to focus on the positive. But essentially what was happening was a business who houses seasonal workers wanted to figure out how to improve their contamination problem. I reached out to them just for a routine check-in with them, and they mentioned that they were having problems with their employees sorting into the correct bins, so trash, recycling, and compost. So we eventually found a time where I could go out to tour their grounds and see their situation. So it was kind of like a walk and talk. We walked around site. I saw all of their waste bins. And as I was moving around site, I did notice some key factors that led to the challenge of contamination in their bins. So one, there were multiple languages being spoken on site, not only English, but their seasonal employees also came from different areas. So there were multiple different languages in play here. Second, there was no clear signage on any of their bins. So that was confusing even for English speakers, I imagine. And another issue that kind of compounded with that was their bins all looked the same. They were identical. They all were the same color, all had the same lids. There was no real clear difference. And me, I even had to ask, I was like, okay, wait, so which one is which here? And like the one employee who was really pro their waste system was like, oh, that's that and that and that. And I was like, all right. So as we moved through, I realized there was some attempts to increase, awareness of what bin is what. There were some signs on some bins, not on others. There were also some instances where there were lone bins by themselves, and that was a little confusing. And even one member of the staff, they did translate like little signs and hung them on the bins, but they said that they were often getting dirty or ripped or removed. And often they were just like a black word that says like recycling with like a white background, and it didn't really pop out in that system there. So that was not really clear signage. It was confusing. So after that walkthrough, where we went through all of the required topics through that walkthrough as we moved through their site, We had a meeting where ACSWMD gave some recommendations. And our largest recommendation to that business was to implement some sort of color coding system. So since they were dealing with multiple different languages, we thought that if they had clear colors associated with each sortation type, so like let's say blue for recycling, black for trash, and green for organics, and had that on signs on the bins, and also probably changing that lid type, that would help with decontamination problems. And then when they have staff training, when they're onboarding new seasonal staff, they can just focus on those colors. And if they're aware of the multiple different languages that their seasonal employees speak, they can really just emphasize, so blues for recycling, and use, whatever word that is in the other language. And we did say they could change their bin systems entirely because again, they're all the same, but that's very pricey. So we did recommend just buying some new lids and switching that out again with the clear color coding. And also if they had blown bins, to not do that because that is very confusing and people often have a problem of just throwing whatever into the first bin that they see. So group those bins together. So after that meeting, I have checked in a couple of times and they did listen to our suggestions. They did implement some sort of color coding system on their site there, and they found that their seasonal workers were sorting better and they had less contamination on site. Still not perfect, no one's perfect, but it was a massive improvement from just everything ending up in every single bin to it being clearly separated out as it should be. So that was definitely a success. Moving on to the challenge, I guess. So this was another instance where there was a language barrier. And this started well before my time at the district dealing with this business. So I'm bringing this one up not just because of the language barrier challenge, but also the challenge of coming into a role where there's historic outreach that's been done. And you're unaware of what's been done, what hasn't been done. And I know some of you on this call are newer into the outreach, so you're probably dealing with that where you find out a business is not in compliance or having problems, and you then have to figure out if one of your predecessors did go there in person or made a phone call or did mailings or whatever. So that's an aspect to that outreach of figuring out, all right, like how long has your district or SWME been reaching out to this entity? So when I found out about this place, I first looked at that. I inherited some notes, and thankfully I do have some members of staff present here who have been here for really a long time. So they kind of had in their memory what was going on with that place. And then got to some outreach. But the issue with this one was, again, it's been many years. This started well before my time there. So with years of outreach, repeated outreach efforts, they still
2-minute warning.
2
just so
minutes. All right.
Yeah, 2
Well,
minutes.
with year 2 minutes. Okay, got it. They still weren't in compliance after many different members of staff here over many different years went and reached out. So I guess that's when the state comes into play. There is a complaint tool that you can use. You can make it anonymous or public. I'm pretty sure I did an anonymous one because I'm a little bit of a scaredy cat. But you can make a complaint and have people who have compliance ability to go in and actually enforce that to go there. So that's what I did. And I decided to do that because it had been many years. There was a lot of historical outreach and they just were not in compliance. And at that point in time, you can try to be the big person and go and try to make it happen. But if it's been like 3 years of people consistently reaching out, it's probably unlikely they will just naturally come into compliance. So that's my success and challenge.
Thank you, Emily. Those are really great examples. Alex, you are now up. Thank you.
Yes, I'm a little more loosey-goosey than Emily. Very good, concise examples. I kind of have themes. Yeah, so I'm not super duper new, but my time at Wyndham Solid Waste has been kind of grant based. So in the past, when SWIP, the money that we were getting through SWIP wouldn't cover my stuff, we would use grant stuff that was doing the same thing. So I had some liberties to take with making signage, making videos, and I realized that that's an extra thing that you don't always get the chance to do. But for my positive stuff, some of you were at the VORS presentation that I did, and I basically just shouted out like, hey, it's so great when you have positive interactions and you find people doing the right thing to share those stories. So if you have that within your budget, within your scope of work, I highly recommend, promoting what folks have been doing and sharing their stories if they're doing it right. They all kind of get tickled when I share their, what I find to be fascinating and so great. Oh, I'm diverting food scraps and I'm doing it in, a number of different ways. They're like, sweet, I didn't know anyone else thought this was cool. And then it also gives an example to folks who think that there's no way they could possibly do it, because there's just so many different ways to divert food scraps, or, well, I guess for hazardous waste, it's kind of a dead end road there. But yeah, definitely when you have positive interactions, find a way to share it, whether that be through Front Porch Forum, whether that's just like a blank statement on your website, like, oh, we have X amount of businesses who are doing this, learn more by contacting me, or whatever. However you get the word out, just put a little snippet out there, put it on folks' the radar. And then in terms of like challenges that I've seen, I was just in Wilmington, Vermont on Saturday, and I revisited one of the businesses that I had visited a couple years ago. I went in, it was dark and dusty. This is the years ago story. There's one old man behind the dusty glass counter, and I wanted to talk to him about recycling and food waste. And, the place is just dead. And he basically was just like, we are so busy right now, I don't have time for this. And I'm looking around, you could hear a pin drop. So I leave, fine. I'm not going to do anything with that. I also didn't really know the state of the business. So I went in there on Saturday. It's a whole new place. You don't always know where a business is at, and that's not included in the script. Sometimes you can kind of perceive that something's up. Like in the case with Emily, where this business had been visited over years, it's like they're obviously doing all right. They're staying afloat. So like I say, that's definitely a complaint, like just out of my hands. But for other folks, and this might be happening in your districts as well, there's a lot of turnover, a lot of folks getting bought out, a lot of businesses failing, and it's a sad state of affairs. So being a little sensitive to that and knowing where they're at with their business is also helpful, so you can show a little bit more empathy. So this place, it turned into a pretty cool brewery, like great for me, I guess, on this day of outreach. But I didn't know at the time that inn was closing down and that they were in dire straits. So yeah, knowing where the business is at. In my breakout room, I was talking with Paula, and she goes for the bottom line, and that's really helpful, because businesses a lot of times just really truly don't have the time or perceived time to talk with you about this kind of stuff. But if you can convince them that you're going to save them money, that's really helpful. So if a business is doing well and wants to do better, finding a way to gauge that is important, because if they're just crusty and mad, maybe something deeper is happening. Maybe it's not so much like they just don't care about recycling or food scraps or hazardous waste. It's more, they could be in the processes of a buyout. And two other businesses while I was in Wilmington also had closing dates announced and more for sale signs. So yeah, that's kind of really what I wanted to share. Prop up the positive stories, share them in any way that you have time to do. Visuals are great. Be wary of closing and going out of businesses. You don't want to add something else to their plate. language barriers are always going to be an issue, and that stencil sign thing looks really cool. Sometimes Google Translate doesn't cut it. Good luck. And if you just get folks that are just really brushing you off and you've gone through the script and you're doing everything that you can, then yeah, that could be an anonymous or a complaint from the waste district. No problem. No skin off your back. And that's what I've got to share.
Oh, great. Thank you. I think you both touched upon a lot of really great things, and both had the themes of trying to lower barriers that might be present based off of, difficulty making decisions at the point of disposal for your employees, and how signage and color can really lend itself to that. And just the realities of languages, all the turnover that can happen. I just love how you call him like it's dusty and he was crusty. But yeah, I mean, that's very true. Like our hope is that if one business is in the winter season of its life and closes, that maybe a new establishment will come in there. And so, something that you checked off your list years ago may look very different than it does now. And so now we're going to spend the remaining 12, 13 minutes for Q&A. We've had a lot of great conversation in the chat about translations, and we do want to point out if we are hoping the DEC to get the Waste Not Guide translated soon, but if you need anything in particular translated in the near future, we can assist with that. And yeah, it looks like we have translations of the single-use product fact sheet already, Vermonter's Guide to Recycling. But yes, if you do need anything in a specific language, you can be in touch with Emma, and she has her contact information in the chat. So Gig has a question of how exactly would outreach save a business money? And so that is a good question, and it sort of for me, I always felt like the conversation of saving money can look a little different depending on what types of material the business is generating. There's obviously a great conversation to be had with waste reduction. A lot of businesses already aren't, over purchasing items that they then need to dispose of. But obviously we know in many situations that there is waste, that is like over purchased, particularly a lot of times in food establishments. And so the conversation of waste reduction can be a little difficult because it's so business specific. But that is certainly a topic that would save a business money. When it comes to, taking, if they're not composting, say, and taking food scraps out of the waste stream and composting it through a system, there is the opportunity to save money if they have the ability to do that themselves and self-haul it. We recognize that there would be, charges for if they were to have a hauler come and pick that up. And so for me, I always found that conversation to be a little difficult to walk along, depending on, if it's a large establishment and they're creating a lot of food scraps, it may be an additional cost to have that compost collection in addition to their trash and recycling. And so, yeah, that certainly is like a case by case. And Emma, do you have anything you'd like to add about that?
Yeah, I would just say it's not common, but we have had cases or heard about cases where folks just haven't been paying attention to the fact that they have a bigger trash dumpster than they need. Yeah, Paul is nodding. And so just like drawing attention, it's like waste reduction. You're like, can you just do overhead reduction there? So that's, and sometimes if they have a lot of food scraps in the trash, maybe you take those food scraps out, maybe then they can shrink. So it's not common, but it does happen that there can be an opportunity there.
Yeah,
Or
that
I
cat
would just say
sounds.
the other thing also is, if folks haven't priced it out, and like we as the state, maybe there's just a competitor who offers a lower cost service, and we as the state are not like out promoting specific companies, but we have a directory of haulers, and whenever I'm giving folks advice on food scraps, I'll say, when you're getting quotes, ask the company exactly what service they provide, because some companies provide a clean bin each time and some don't. It's the customer's job to clean the bin. Some companies provide a cover material, the cap and smells, and some don't. So just trying like through the spiel that I'm giving, like the tips that I'm giving them the context of like, oh, I could get quotes from multiple companies and like, oh, there's different sizes available. And sort of that can be a way to equip them to spend less money on their service.
Thank you. Pam, do you have a separate question or something to add on this?
Just something to add on to that. I have several restaurants in my 2 districts that have managed to collaborate with a farmer, and they're, it's no cost to them. The farmer wants the food scraps. Some of them are pig farmers, and I've made it clear that they can't put meat in there. But that's, if they're looking to really save money, and not have to pay a hauler to come, a compost hauler, that's another issue that you could, bring up, suggest.
Mhm. Yeah, certainly one consideration in addition to the restrictions on feeding pigs meat and fish items or anything that's come in contact with it. And in some farming situations, the pigs aren't there all year round. And so that's something like if a business is using that, just making sure that they're aware that the changes within the farming season, if the swine are harvested, that sounded really odd. But if the swine are sent off the farm for the next part of their life, then they won't be there, and that farmer might not be able to accept that material certain times of the year. I've seen that a few times, and so it's always good to make sure they're aware that whatever system that they have or combination of systems that they have needs to be available throughout the entire year and not seasonally, depending on whatever farming operations might happen. Um, I'm just reading reading in the chat. Does anyone else? Oh, Alex, yes.
Yeah, I had a general store. They switch out this little sign. I mean, all their few employees speak English, and it's just like, we are now giving to pigs. So they kind of use the same bins that they use in their kitchen setup and reduce, don't put any meat or whatever in there, but they switch out. And then the owners, so sweet, have a pickup truck. They go like, 2 miles up the road to the transfer station where they can drop food scraps for free. So having a transfer station that accepts food scrap drop off is such a blessing, because for some other people, it's like they have to come all the way to Brattleboro. It's really tough. And our waste districts, I think specifically, I don't know about you guys, maybe put it in the chat, but we have a hard time finding haulers that will take food scraps. So that infrastructure is little. We have big guys that take it for very expensive, and we have a few smaller ones that are just at capacity. So having that transfer station that accepts it is really key.
Alexandra or Sharon, I'm not sure who has their hands up in the screen.
Am I muted? Hi. So I used to actually, years ago, something like 15 years ago, do a lot of the outreach for Hartford, and I've done it in the Bennington area and Mad River. And what I found is that schools and businesses, sometimes they had a dumpster that was too large, and maybe they couldn't get a smaller dumpster, but they could get a pickup every 2 weeks instead of every 1 week, or every 3 weeks instead of every 2 weeks. And that was a good cost savings for them that could help justify enlarging their recycling dumpster or taking on other. And the other thing is that regardless of age or language, the visual rather than literal signage is pretty effective. If you have a simple graphic, and the state symbols, the garbage can, the apple sliced in half, and the recycling, whatever, that sometimes it's enough, but sometimes it needs to be more explicit. And that seems to be more effective than just words. Just the visual, especially if you're like dealing with youngers or people with language barriers, at play.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said that, over the past few decades, our attention span, I'm pretty sure has decreased quite a bit. I know like I've heard about it specifically with like job interviews, like, whereas before your resume might have been glanced over for 30 seconds, like now it's like 8. And then, we see it with social media as well. What we're drawn to is very image driven, things that are a little bit more bright, flashy, but not so much text. And so I think that is a really great tool. Like we were in Ann and I and Desna from Rutland were in Starbucks the other day, and they had some really great ideas with color and images and icons, but then maybe fell a little bit short on the size of the icons, where they were placed. They weren't at eye level, they were down, like sort of right on top of the hole, but very small. And so, again, a lot of great ideas. But then when you looked inside, the contamination was just all throughout. And so, one thing that's great about business outreach is there's always room for improvement. How easy it is to help them get to that improvement can sometimes be difficult. But there's always room for a little improvement. Anyone else have any other questions or comments they'd like to add? I'm just looking through the chat again. Gabriella, yeah?
I know we're a bit short on time, and this can always be a conversation for another time, but I was wondering if anybody had any specific strategies for dealing with chain stores. I've noticed especially that there are some chain stores that do great here, but I've been told, or I know that like outside of that specific town or area, they might not comply, or only the one store that I go to is complying and everybody else isn't, and getting a hold of corporate is a big pain. So does anybody have any kind of strategies for that, or any systems for finding the right person to talk to?
You want me to chime in, Shannon? Okay, great question. Thank you for saying that. So, yes, the chains are also often regions beyond your region or even are statewide. So that's a great time to recruit our team. And in our outreach, we are trying to focus partly on chains, and we are chipping away at working through getting to the right person and getting compliance statewide at chains. But it's, as you're describing, it's a process. So, yeah, I'd say feel free to send us a note or do us an anonymous tip. But if you do anonymous, please just put as much information in as you can. It's helpful when we first reach out to the compliance officer, the sustainability officer, the facilities manager, the district manager, whoever, to know of a specific place that is not compliant. And we can say this place needs to come into compliance, and we need to make sure all your other locations are compliant. And then the other thing I'll just say is that we keep for ourselves a list of corporate contacts in case, I'm working with Dollar General right now, but in 2 years, like they bubble up again, we have somewhere to start with. So if you're doing outreach, you should always feel free to be in touch with any of us from our team, whoever your point person is. You can always ask and say, hey, do you have a contact for Dollar Tree? I'm trying to get in touch for this with this store. And if you find a good contact for a chain, we would love to have it. So if you happen to remember, please send it our way and we'll save it, and it might be useful down the line. Yeah, I can put the link in the chat, Paula.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a great question to end this off, because certainly, yeah, we recognize that with chains, it's just a one-off location, and there has to be a way to ensure that this is happening all throughout these different locations, and that's something that we at the DEC have been focusing on, and are excited to have those contacts at the corporate level to ensure that if you're a franchise owner and you have 7 locations in your franchise, and we found non-compliance at one, that compliance is now at all 7 locations. And so we are at 10:30. I just want to make sure that people are aware, again, that script, the checklist, all the resources that we mentioned, all be found on our planning website. So dec.gov, waste management /all such planning. Can't copy and text paste this off the screen, but it is in the chat as well. And then our contact information here, if you want to reach out to Anne or myself or have questions for Alex or Emily, we're all available for you to connect with afterwards. And yeah, certainly as questions arise, feel free to reach out to us. Our main goal is, obviously businesses to be in compliance, but when it comes to swimmies, our goal is collaboration. We want, like Anne mentioned, like we would love to go out and have days with you out in the field if you don't feel like that's appropriate, but you want us to approach businesses that you don't feel like you have the capacity to in your area. That's how we can collaborate. And so, yeah, we just want to be involved, make this a statewide goal and make teamwork, make the dream work type thing. I feel like I've been saying that like way too much lately, but it's been a phrase that's on my mind. So with that, I want to say thank you, everyone. And Anne,
I
yes?
just want to ask one quick question before everyone goes. We've been doing some of these trainings on and off. Would people, an hour is so short, and I really like the breakout room ideas. That's the first time we tried it. Would people want like a longer meeting? Would an hour and a half be okay, or is an hour just kind of what you can squeeze in? Like would people, I guess, raise your hand if you would like a longer meeting? Okay, so okay, so it's maybe mixed, maybe an hour is good. Oh,
Like
now
longer breakout is awesome. I like talking with other folks.
yeah,
Yeah.
we haven't tried that before, so I think that was it's good to hear. I realized when I sent everybody into breakout rooms, I didn't get put in one. So that's why I was just kind
Yeah.
of quickly going to others.
Also
So
very nice.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. Yeah, and Emma, a plug for our school outreach roundtable at 2 p.m. on May 23rd. So we hope to see many of you then. And thanks again so much for coming. And get out there, talk to people, have a conversation, have some fun. All right.
And
Thank you.
Allison, I do see, I did send an email out previously with the calendar information for that.
And then you want to just forward it to Allison again?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question about the school outreach meetings. Is it possible at one of these meetings to get somebody from the Department of Education to come to talk to us so that we can try to, I don't know, try to figure out how we actually get them to help promote this and not us coming from the bottom up, but try to have them come from the top down also?
Yeah, Pam, I'm writing it down, and I think we want to have time